Monday. Hope you all had a wonderful weekend. Donovan McNabb in the house, Stephen A. Smith, Max Kellerman. I'm Molly Qerim, and besides, guys, getting into a lot of...
Don't shake my hand. He's sick.
A lot of intense topics. I know. We're doing some serious gym,
That's right.
some gym time here. We're all going to be putting in a little bit later today. We've all been eating pretty well.
I'm just trying to look out for my man, Max. I just wanted to say on this this Monday morning, I hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Mine was a little bit rough. Too many damn kids around, but that's a different subject for another day.
Time out. Look, I thought Stevie A loves the kids.
He sure does. He sure does. But damn it, it was too many of them. But Max, I just want to let the world know he's a little bit sick today. So the regular beat down, I'm going to step back. There'll be a little knock.
You're going
to
Yeah, right. I'm good. I'm feeling good. I got to see Lomachenko put it on Walters.
Oh, my God, don't give me
Lomachenko, that's a bad boy.
Walters quit. Walters quit. I don't even want to talk about him.
All right, let's get into some football.
Yep.
We start with Sunday Night Football, where the Kansas City Chiefs blew a fourth-quarter lead, only to come back and win the game in Denver in overtime at a 34-yard field goal after the Broncos mixed a 62-yard kick. Kansas City now moves to 8-3, good for second in the division. The loss puts the Broncos 2 games behind the Raiders in the AFC West and out of the playoff picture. Max, will the Broncos make the playoffs?
I cannot believe I'm sitting here and saying this at this point in the season because I thought they were one of the 2 best teams in the AFC to start the season. No, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. And it just comes down to their schedule. You got the Jags on the road. You got the Titans on the road. Then you have the Patriots, Chiefs on the road, and the Raiders. That is murderer's row of a schedule. And it's not so much that they're not as good as the other teams, even in their division, the Chiefs or the Raiders. But that schedule is brutal, and they have ground to make up in order to get it. I just don't see it.
I think they make the playoffs. And we've talked about how great this conference is. I should say has been, but it's about quarterback play. I mean, when you look at Derek Carr and the emergence of this year alone, and being an MVP candidate, leading this team with a lack of defense from at least half of the season. Now they're starting to turn things around. Then you go over to Kansas City. Andy Reid has done a great job with Alex Smith of just having him manage it intermediately. What I mean by that is just throwing passes under 12 to 15 yards and just moving the ball methodically. Their defense is outstanding, and I think they will only continue to get better. Now, as far as the Denver Broncos is concerned, I think they beat the Oakland Raiders. In that last game of the season, I think they beat the Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead. We already know they're going to beat Jacksonville. So right there, that's 10 wins. And I believe they steal another one as they go along. So
if you just give them road wins against the Chiefs and they're going to beat the Raiders, just give it to them, sure.
The thing about the Kansas City Chiefs that has pulled me away from them a little bit is the lack of run game. With Jamal Charles being out, I'm looking for Ware to carry the load a little bit more, and he just hasn't done it as well as I thought he would.
We're going to get into Kansas City a little bit later in the next segment. Let me just answer your question directly and look at this man right here, the blasphemy coming out of your mouth. I will not disrespect the reigning defending Super Bowl champions in such a fashion. I will show Akeem Talib more respect with that. I will show Chris Harris more respect than that. You know, this kid, Roby and the crew, I will show them more respect than that. They are the reigning, defending Super Bowl champions with an elite defense that has been suspect against the run. We understand that. But I remind you that New England Patriots game coming up, that Oakland Raider game coming up, both of those games are in Denver. I mean, when you talk about Kansas City against Denver, no matter where it's at, it's a pick'em, okay? So we got to look at it from that perspective, and we know they're going to beat Jacksonville. So we're talking about 10 wins. And I think, Max, I don't know if you realize the magnitude of your words and how disrespectful they are, and I'm going to help you out here. When we look at the AFC South, we all know the winner is, the winner's going to come out of that. And there's not going to be a wild card out of that division. That's all I'm trying to say, right? We know that. Scratch that. Same could be said right now for the AFC North because you got Baltimore and Pittsburgh at 6-5. Cincinnati's done. Cleveland, Lord have mercy. So we won't even get to that, okay? Then we go to the AFC East. Well, it's New England. But then after that, even though Miami's 7-4, what I'm saying to you, listen what I'm saying. We're talking about the AFC West possibly having 3 teams in the playoffs. So I'm looking at it from the perspective that if you're going to tell me that the Denver Broncos are going to miss out, you're saying either somebody from the South, the North, or the Miami Dolphins with Ryan Tannehill are going to the playoffs.
He was throwing the ball well yesterday. He was.
Stop it, Molly.
They weren't just running it. He was throwing well. And that defense was coming on.
By the way,
Sue and Wake.
I sprinkle water on her. Stop the haterade. Stop it right now.
She's not wrong.
I don't. She's going to be wrong. Ultimately,
I'm a staunch anti-Tannehill guy through these last couple years, but I got to admit what I see. He's playing pretty well.
The month of November, he's at over 100 QB rating.
I do understand that.
My man,
and Gase is doing an exceptional job with them. And the guy we know can run the football, etc. You know, it came down to the wire where you had to stop Colin Kaepernick. You know, the modern day Malcolm X wannabe.
He was balling.
That was the best
He was balling. I know you're a little upset because he didn't go vote.
Come on,
give him some credit now.
Give him some credit.
Give him some credit.
I'm allergic to that right now. I'm just allergic to that right now. I can't help it.
We're more upset about his Fidel Castro comments, which we'll get into later.
Yeah, I know you are. But I mean, we're talking about football.
We're talking football. In football, listen, he was high. You know, he stepped up. He made some plays, but ultimately, again, couldn't get it done. All I'm saying is these are the San Francisco 49ers that walked into this game having lost 9 straight, and you're the Miami Dolphins, and you're struggling. And I'm supposed to give you the edge over 3 teams in the AFC West? I'm not doing it. So that's why I say Denver will probably make the playoffs, because the team they got to watch out for most is Miami, and I don't see it. I just don't.
Got a brutal schedule. You guys are just kind of giving them that.
They're the champion
for a win. Like, you think the Raiders are real or not?
I do.
Well, the Raiders are real, but I think more of the question shouldn't be about is Denver going to make the playoffs? Will Kansas City make the playoffs? They have a tough road finishing up toward the end of their schedule as well. So you just talked about it, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Tennessee Titans. I think those are 2 wins the Denver Broncos will get.
I don't know about the Titans. I don't know about the Titans on the road.
The thing about Tennessee is we never talk about their defense. And I think when you look at what the Denver Broncos have been able to do, when you look at the receivers that they have, I don't think that the Tennessee Titans can stop them as far as passing the ball. They couldn't stop Chicago and Matt Barkley yesterday.
You know what I don't like about your analysis sometimes, man? You give very astute analysis. See, Donovan and I go back a long way. This is how he always been this way. He always been this way. See, the quarterbacks get interviewed on Wednesdays, and then after that, you don't talk to them until Sunday. So Donovan will sit there and dissect stuff, sounds very astute and all of that stuff. And if you catch a crack in his argument, you can't find him. That's what you do on this show. You come here Monday, all right? You wrong about Wednesday or Thursday. We got to go through Friday, and then we forget about Monday what the hell you said.
Yeah, could you tweet at us at least?
I mean, you got to be found, Donovan McNabb, because let me tell you something. When I look at Kansas City, let's look at the schedule. Atlanta's going to be tough. Oakland, Tennessee, Denver, San Diego. Tough schedule, no doubt.
Yeah.
But Kansas City, coached by the great Andy Reid.
Absolutely.
Give it up. Okay, your coach. All
Absolutely.
right. Give him love. I can give Colin Kaepernick love, but I
give Andy some love.
Give him love.
They just barely beat San Diego. I don't think
Donovan show him the love.
And probably Andy Reid is going to show up later in the playoffs, not during the regular season.
See why you got to go there? See, you know what I mean?
There we go. All I'm saying is,
Let's stay
in the AFC West. Let's go to the Raiders. It was a wild one in the black hole where we saw last year's MVP in Cam Newton take on this year's potential MVP in Derek Carr. After the Raiders gave up 25 straight points, Carr, with a crooked pinky finger gamer, orchestrated his 9th game-winning drive yesterday. That's the 2nd most in the NFL in the 4th quarter or overtime in the last 2 seasons, defeating Carolina 35-32. Khalil Mack ended the game with a strip sack and now has a sack in 6 straight games, the longest active streak in the NFL. Stephen A., are the Raiders the best team in the AFC West?
You know what? As much as I've raved about them, and I still do because their offense is elite, I don't want to say they're the best team in the AFC West. I'm going to have to give that love to the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm going to have to do it. I'm going to have to do it. Here's why. Bevy of injuries, particularly with the absence of Jamal Charles, they just find a way to get it done. There's something about them that reminds me of when you guys, the year y'all Philadelphia Eagles went to the Super Bowl in this respect. Somehow, some way, when adversity hits, they don't panic. They find a way to usually get it done. I know they lost the week before to Tampa, and I get all that. Alex Smith, QBR of 50, hasn't been himself. I get all of that. Got concussed against Indianapolis a few weeks ago. Right. Hasn't seemed the same, even though he denies that there's any changes in him. He just said that the defenses have been tough. I don't buy that. But I look at Kansas City right now, Macklin being out for a 3rd consecutive game, Jamal Charles being out, Alex Smith not having been himself. And somehow, some way, with Eric Berry and Tamba Ali and Houston and the crew, these guys are finding a way to make things happen. And this kid Hall, oh, my Lord have mercy. These boys showed up yesterday. I'm just looking at Kansas City right now, a team that smacked around the Raiders when they played them earlier this year.
Right.
And I'm saying Arrowhead Stadium, you know how tough it is to play there, and I'm looking at where they are right now in terms of both sides of the football and special teams. I can't definitively give it to anybody in the West over them right now because of how they've looked.
So disrespectful.
Yeah, you just raved about the Denver Broncos making the playoffs over all these other teams.
I didn't say anything about them winning
all
the division.
these other teams. You were totally disrespectful to Tannehill and his 100.
And excuse me, Donovan. You were disrespectful to this man.
Yeah.
So disrespectful. Talking about Andy, comparing Alex Smith, who's a fine quarterback, to Donovan McNabb.
I wasn't comparing him. I was talking about Philly,
Kansas City. You said, yeah, it was Philly, Kansas City.
I was not. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that.
But the difference is,
look at how
Donovan
my words
McNabb. By the way, I'm happy to say this on TV about you because I haven't had a chance yet. Donovan McNabb was basically John Elway minus the last 2 years of his career, and that is not Alex Smith. They lived in the NFC Championship game.
I am not comparing Alex Smith to Donovan McNabb. I'm comparing the Philadelphia Eagles of the year that they went there to what I'm seeing from Kansas City right now in terms of facing adversity and making things happen. How do y'all isolate Alex Smith and Donovan McNabb? It's a setup, you politicians. It's a setup.
You felt it, didn't you? Donovan, when he said it, you felt that, right? First thing was, you called me Alex Smith.
So that's what we do now, Felix. It felt that way. It felt that way.
Look, you say you've been a booster of the Raiders, and now you're doing an about face. Let me say, Raiders Nation, and they have a nation. Like, you talk about national following.
Right.
Maybe we haven't paid enough attention to them just based on their fan base this year. It's the Cowboys and Steelers, of course, and the Raiders. They have a huge national following.
Offense, not them.
I'm just talking about how interested people are in them, even out of market. Their offense is tremendous. They have a great offensive line. It's comparable to the Cowboys' offensive line. It's elite. They have, I'm going to talk about the quarterback in a second, a couple of excellent receivers.
True.
I mean, Crabtree has fulfilled his potential there. And their defense is coming around. It's gotten much better as the season's come along.
You're going to say this off of them giving up 25 straight?
Because when you go from the worst in the league to something better than that, all you need in Oakland is a bend but don't break defense. I don't think they're going to win the Super Bowl this year, as some people do, but let me just say where I've been wrong about them. I've considered them, because of the lack of defense, a kind of typical NFL team that doesn't have enough to be truly good, but they have an excellent quarterback. I have underestimated just how special Derek Carr is. When you have a special quarterback like that, and you are an average to above average team, otherwise you can win, and that's what they've been doing.
After all the touchdowns and everything that he was doing, the fact that he came back from the hurt pinky is what moved you. Who are you, Austin Powers, now the smile who shagged me?
I'm not going to allow you to talk about my quarterbacks right now. Listen, first of all, when you think of the three teams in the division, you talk about the two with great defenses, Kansas City, and you talk about the Denver Broncos. Not just the front seven, but the secondary. The secondary in Kansas City, I think, is a little bit overlooked. When you have Eric Berry, you have Peters, they have guys who can create turnovers on the defensive end. You look at the Denver Broncos.
Gains, too.
The same thing in the Denver Broncos secondary. Aqib Talib. You talk about all these guys that can make plays happen. T.J. Ward can come in the box. He can play from a distance. But when you look at the Oakland Raiders, that's part of their weakness is their secondary. Yeah, offensively, you might go into the playoffs and win one game, but your defense has to carry the load through. And I don't think that they're able to do that. We can talk so much about Khalil Mack. I think he's one of the best defensive players in the league, if he's not defensive player of the year.
Question.
But where else is going to be anybody going to create something from that opposite side?
You're talking about winning a Super Bowl. I agree.
No, I'm talking about winning in the playoffs. Winning in the playoffs.
Are they the best team in the AFC West?
I still think the Denver Broncos
When push comes to shove, though, Donovan, I hear what you're saying, like the Chiefs should be or the Broncos should be. What I'm saying is I agreed with that up until yesterday, where finally it's like, you know what?
They gave up 25 straight on
It's a terrible day to do that.
But their quarterback shows
How he came back.
every time that with the chips on the line, he's the best player on the
Colin,
field.
yeah.
about their defense.
Perfect example. We're talking about their defense. We can say the same thing about the New England Patriots. When Tom Brady was out, somebody else stepped in. But their defense still is a question. We can talk New England Patriots all the time. But when your quarterback is in there, yeah, you have the confidence that you can win the game. But if you're giving up 25 straight points versus the Carolina Panthers, who their season is over with,
right?
And what do you think is going to happen in the playoffs when you play against some of these tough teams in the AFC? That's the only thing that I'm worried about. I love Derek Carr. I love Murray. I love Crabtree. I love what I'm seeing with Amari Cooper. But they don't play defense. And if you can't stop anybody on defense and they're constantly gashing you with the intermediate passing game and the run game,
they're not going to win a Super Bowl.
Is standing on the sideline.
They're not going to win the Super Bowl, but they're the best team in the division.
Being the best team in the division,
you can't say that if you only talk about one side of the ball.
Right.
Yeah, actually.
You're thinking that Carr could cover the sins. He's enough of a gamer.
I've been on the other side of this argument all year, but at a certain point, like
they
say,
say, the Giants' defense and the lack of offense.
They say in nature twice is coincidence, 3 times is pattern. Derek Carr's been doing this all year, like 10 times already.
Pause for a second here. Let's rewind that for a second here. You know why I got a problem with your position? Because what Derek Carr them did yesterday, they've essentially been doing all season.
Yep.
Their offense has been. So in other words, Max didn't. I can understand if the defense showed up and looked lights out yesterday. Right. No, they just did what they've been doing all year, and Max didn't want to accept it. Now the epiphany has hit you.
Yep.
In terms
and
of
I'll tell you why. The way that game was going when they started bleeding, right?
Yes.
It just felt like they were going to lose the game. Like, here it comes. Because some people did pick Carolina going into this game. It was a topic on our show. It had the feeling of a game they could lose. And when it started happening, you thought, here it comes. The magic runs out. And what Derek Carr showed is the magic doesn't run out because it's not like a parlor trick. This is what he has.
Khalil Mack called it the Mamba in him. He says the Kobe in him comes out.
Your analysis ain't wrong. All I'm saying to you is that he's been doing it, and you didn't want to accept it.
I may be slow, but I'm not stupid.
Yeah, look at the whole picture, man.
We'll accept that.
Yeah.
We'll accept that.
All right.
Way to go.
We want you guys to weigh in at home. Are the Raiders the best team in the AFC? Vote on the First Take Twitter page. We'll show those results a little later in the show. Donovan is sticking around. And coming up next, the Packers playoff are slim chances unless they win out. And someone believes they can, and it starts tonight against the Eagles.
I think getting closer to that, we've really been clicking at times in the last few games, but I just feel like it just takes one. We get one under our belts, things might start rolling for us, and we can run the table.
Look what you done.
Stephen A., last week you said the Seahawks were the biggest threat to the Dallas Cowboys in the NFC. Well, yesterday they didn't live up to your expectations as it was a low-scoring affair when they lost to the Bucs 14-5. Russell Wilson was sacked a season-high 6 times. This is their 3rd straight game this season without a TD. Seattle 2-3-1 on the road, and this was Earl Thomas's first game he's ever missed in his career. Stephen A., are the Seahawks still the biggest threat to the Dallas Cowboys?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. I'm not fazed. Mere bag of shells. It's no big deal. Listen, here's the deal. When you got teams like the Seattle Seahawks that have the kind of character that they have, getting punked this late in the season actually ends up being a good thing because their pride kicks in, that bravado, that machismo, they say, and they raise up and respond to such challenges. They got punked yesterday. They got beat up, beat down, smacked around. Russell Wilson, it talks about here, our producer extraordinaire David Sabino. Let's give him some love post-Thanksgiving. I mean, he had enough love on Thanksgiving. See how big that boy is.
Sabino's the best. Sabino's the best.
I'm just saying, he's a big boy. This is all love. It's all love. He's a big boy. He's a big boy. He appreciates it. Here's the deal. You know.
Let me tell you something. If you, the great researchers are always fat guys because they're sitting there by the computer.
Fat, you guys.
They're sitting there by the computer.
He's not.
They're
sitting
by the computer doing research.
See, you crossed the line. I said he's a big boy. I didn't say fat.
Yeah,
see what I'm saying? I said big boy. But that's the deal. David, that's Max. That's not me. Here's the deal.
Love you, Dave.
All right.
I can't.
Russell Wilson pressured on a career high 27 of his 45 dropbacks. That's 60%. He couldn't breathe all night long. They were all over him. What was he on third downs? Like 2 or 7, sacked 3 times on third downs. It was a long night for him. and you just look at them offensively, 5 points, only 151 yards passing. Your leading rusher was Russell Wilson. Who ran for 80 yards. Other than that, Rawls is something wrong with it. You better get, I'm telling you, Christian Michael knows what's coming back. Rawls is going to be on the bench.
Banged up O-line, spent the least amount of money on that offensive
I know
line.
that, but still in all, when you've got these other guys at certain junctures of the season that have stepped in, Rawls is going to have to figure that out. In the end, what it comes down to is this. Tampa surprising.
Right.
Give their defense a lot of love and credit.
And Jameis.
All right, and Jameis. But the flip side is that Seattle got to get themselves together offensively, and it starts with that offensive line they're going to have to figure out. I believe they will.
The thing that I worried about Seattle, and this has been 4 weeks now, we talked about it on my show, McNabb and Custer, 10 p.m. Eastern to 1 a.m.
Right.
That's a radio show we're talking about?
Radio show, channel 80.
10 p.m. to 1 a.m.
So you know you don't have to look at the camera.
Just
the camera looking at
got it.
That's all right. I just had to look back and give that eye. You got to throw that eye at them.
I feel you on that.
People, you know,
right. Dancing with the Stars coming up next.
Yeah, you might want to tune in. You can get a great insight for the show. But when I look at when I look at the Seattle Seahawks, the thing I worry about is not about Russell Wilson because I think he's getting healthier and we've seen what he can do if he has to tote the ball. But it's the running game, the lack of running game. Precise was a guy that all of a sudden he came out of nowhere. He's hurt now. You talk about Rawls coming back. He's coming off of injury of the last 2 weeks. He still has to get the rust off of him. So now you're relying so much on Russell Wilson to do it all when you haven't heard much from Baldwin or Kurz. All of a sudden, Jimmy Graham is getting targeted more than 10 or 12 times in a game. So they have to be able to open that offense up. But when I look at the offensive line, they've been struggling all season. You can always say that Russell Wilson's not healthy. Well, if you don't have a healthy quarterback, that means he's a pocket passer. So offensive line has at least given him some time to be able to dissect the defense and go through his reads. But defensively was the one that I was really in question. How do you allow Jameis, Martin, and Mike Evans to come at you that way in that first half and play pretty much a flawless first half versus this defense? Yeah, Earl Thomas isn't in there, but Cam Chancellor's back. Avrill's in there. Richard Sherman is still there. I know Michael Bennett is on his way back, but this isn't the same team that we've seen over the last couple of years. It's a good thing that they lost, yes, at this particular point, because I thought it would have been a good thing if Dallas would have lost to Washington so that they can kind of recalibrate and come back together and understand going forward what they need to do. But I'm just a little worried going forward of what they're going to do in order to run the football. Marshawn Lynch plays so much of a big dividend for them because he was able to tote it on the first and second down. But they need somebody to carry the load, at least 15 carries, strong carries, to average 3.5, maybe 4.5 yards a pop.
I'm glad you brought up Marshawn Lynch because they're really missing beast mode. And usually with teams that have star running backs, people overestimate the impact of the running back because it has to do more with the offensive line. And there are a lot of running backs that are interchangeable in football. Put them behind a good offensive line, they look good. A bad offensive line, not so good. Look at Todd Gurley right now. He's very talented, but struggling. Beast mode made a big difference. But this is why I think the Seahawks are a legitimate threat to the Cowboys. And it makes me sick, by the way, that we start with the premise that, we just assume it's implicit, right? The Cowboys are the team to beat.
Right.
Like, we are now living in that world, unfortunately.
You're not going to lead into
that's the way it goes.
Giants win, and all of a sudden they win the NFC East.
Oh, God, please. All right, anyway, the point is, here's the problem with the Cowboys. They can't get pressure on the quarterback.
Right.
That's their Achilles heel. I'm not saying it will be their undoing, but if they are to be undone, that will probably be the problem. Now, the Seahawks, the philosophy in Seattle seems to be, we are not going to invest a lot in our offensive line, either in terms of draft picks until very recently or money. We're going to hope that through the course of the season, they play together enough that they develop chemistry and get to be adequate. That was happening until this last game, where Russell Wilson won very good. You know why? He got sacked 6 times because they can't protect him. So that's a problem, unless you're playing against a team that can't get pressure on the other quarterback. Suddenly, the Cowboys are going to make the Seahawks offensive line better than it is. And to me, more than anything, more than not having Marshawn Lynch there anymore, more than the defense not showing up, as you mentioned, the number one issue with Seattle is the offensive line and their ability to protect Russell Wilson, even more than block for the run.
Let me interject.
If the Cowboys can't really exploit that, the Seahawks could beat them.
Here's the deal. Looking at the Seahawks schedule, do you realize they only have 2 road games left? At Green Bay, ain't that tough these days. At San Francisco, forgive me. I don't think I should be too worried. You got home games against Carolina, the Rams, Arizona. Those are divisional games, so we'll give it its due respect and recognize it could potentially be tough. But if you're the Seattle Seahawks and you've got your horses and they're in that lineup and on that field, you should beat 4 of the next 5 opponents that you're going up against. So we're talking about an 11-3-1 season, a number 2 seed in the NFC, and essentially a championship game in the NFC championship game, assuming the Cowboys live up to the hype and make it there. The Cowboys hosting an NFC championship game with Seattle being the ones to visit. I don't think that that's something that anybody can ignore. I love what I'm seeing from Atlanta. Their offense is high-powered, no doubt. The defense is playing better. But you think about they're Oakland and they're the Oakland Raiders of the NFC. And so that's what we're talking about here. I still think it comes down to Seattle.
All right, let's get into tonight's game. At 4-6, the Packers are well out of the playoff picture, but as Aaron Rodgers said last week, he's not worried at all.
I feel like we can run the table. I really do. I think the offense is starting to click a little bit more. We just got to put together a game where we're consistent from the first snap to the last. We've been, I think, getting closer to that. We've really been clicking at times in the last few games, but I just feel like it just takes one. We get one under our belts, things might start rolling for us, and we can run the table.
Run the table. How about it? They've lost 4 straight, and even with a victory tonight, they would remain 2 games behind the division-leading Lions. Max, will the Packers beat the Eagles tonight on Monday Night Football?
I don't think they will. I think people are forgetting how good the Eagles looked early in the season, and I realize that when Lane Johnson's suspension kicked in, they fell apart. They fell apart. They're much more vulnerable as a result. However, they're at home. And the Packers' defense has given up 30 points in 4 straight games for the first time since 1953. That's pre-Lombardi. They've given up 40 points in consecutive games for the first time since 1952. The Packers' defense allowed Mariota to put up a 97 QBR and Kirk Cousins to put up a 94 QBR. Their defense is atrocious. And therefore, the Lane Johnson absence means much less. And I think Carson Wentz in this game will show again what he showed early in the season, that he is a special talent in spite of not having that protection on the O-line.
Yeah, he may be a special talent, but he needs special help around him. When you look at the wide receiver position at this particular point, they are struggling on the outside. Now, I've been waiting for Zach Ertz and Brent Selleck to be a major part in this offense. That's what a West Coast offense is all about, establishing that tight end and then working your way outside. But when you look at the Philadelphia Eagles offense, the thing that I worry about is they have no running back. Matthews will be out this game. Now you're relying on Darren Sproles and Smallwood to run the football.
Sproles?
Yeah, but you're going to give a 35-year-old running back 20 carries and Darren Sproles? No.
Every time they give him the ball, anytime the Giants play the Eagles and they don't throw it to Sproles in the flat, or they don't give it to Sproles, I think as a Giants fan, thank God they didn't give it to Sproles.
Westbrook killed the Giants too. So that's out of this
Sproles
this
is a
conversation.
bad dude, even at this age.
So is Westbrook. But the whole thing about it, you need a pounder for a guy like Carson Wentz. There's somebody to establish the interior part of the running play so that now the play-action game plays a major part. But let's go to the defense of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're not talking about what Green Bay has on offense because they are powerful on offense. Lack of run game, yes. But now you have to stop Jordy Nelson. You have to stop Randall Cobb. You have to stop Adams. You have guys on the outside that can become a problem, especially playing against the Philadelphia Eagles, where their secondary has been exposed over the last couple of weeks. They need to get pass rush on Aaron Rodgers and be able to bring him down. But the way I worry about this game, and I'll be at the game, they're inducting Merrill Reese and Jeremiah Trotter into the Hall of Fame, so I will be there. And the thing that I worry about this particular game is what Philadelphia Eagles team will show up. Will it be the last 7 games, or will it be the first 3 games? The things about this particular football team is everyone jumped on that bandwagon early on in the beginning because it was a rookie quarterback. He was playing well. Everybody around him was making plays. Defense was one of the best in the league. Now all of a sudden things change. Is it going to be the late type of Philadelphia Eagles team that we've seen with turnovers and things of that nature start to create themselves? Because that gives more opportunity for Green Bay.
A couple of things I want to say. Glad you brought them brothers up. Congratulations. They deserve it. The voices of the Philadelphia Eagles. They've done a phenomenal job for many, many years. Both very, very well deserving. Having said all of that, let's get back to the Eagles because you've echoed points that I've made on numerous occasions on this show. Their wide receiver is a problem. Okay, now Ryan Matthews is not going to be out. They're the 27th ranked offense against with the pass. Why? Because Carson Wentz doesn't have anybody to throw it to. That's really what it comes down to. Jordan Matthews can play. We know that Sproles can still get it done, but really as a pass catcher out of the backfield as opposed to an obvious runner. So you don't have a bona fide runner. The Eagles' defense, I think, are behind the 8 ball because they don't have much help because their offense isn't giving it to them. That's the problem. That was the problem with Chip Kelly last year. We've learned. Personnel for the Philadelphia Eagles is not the issue. Malcolm Jenkins and the crew, they can obviously play. The bottom line is this. Because the offense can't get anything done and you've got guys out there in exorbitant amount of minutes, it's exposing the defense more like similar to last year when Chip Kelly was there than it did earlier in this season when in terms of pace of play, you know, they were slower than almost everybody else. Then we take this into consideration. This guy Aaron Rodgers that we keep going off about, this guy Aaron Rodgers that hasn't been himself, this guy Aaron Rodgers that simply can't get it done. 25 touchdowns, just 7 interceptions, QBR 72.
Numbers.
You know, all I'm saying to you is
he's
this.
Still a bad dude.
He's still a bad boy. The problem with Green Bay, that secondary. I watched them against the Redskins.
Everybody's
last week.
hurt.
I'm just saying, I know that. But I'm just saying.
But that's the reality.
Listen,
Yeah.
guys are hurt. But these are NFL players. Gunter, Goodman, and I could not believe how bad they were against the Redskins.
Yeah.
Hyde, I was like this, my God, they're horrible. I mean, it was one of those things where you just found yourself as a neutral observer because, you know, you're not a diehard fan of either team. You were like this. Damn,
so doesn't
y'all.
that make, that's my point, that makes the Eagles' skills position players better than they should be.
But their skill position players haven't appeared to be very skilled.
They can't exploit that secondary?
I'm just saying, we don't know. I'm just saying, we really don't know.
Yeah,
listen,
I feel like they can't. They're not as bad as that secondary.
Donovan brought up Zellick and Ertz, and he's right about that because Brent Zellick and Zach Ertz can play.
Yeah.
What the hell has happened to them this year?
Yeah.
I don't know. Max, I don't know what has happened to them. I expected the Eagles to have a high-powered offense because of those two.
Offenses get healthy against the Green Bay defense. That's my point. They get healthy, and you're right. The defense is exposed because in a pass-happy league, which this is, I don't care how good your secondary is. If you keep getting shots, you're going to start to win.
It could happen.
That offense could exploit the Packers.
It could happen, but I got to see it.
He can't turn the football over in this particular game.
That's right. It could happen, but I got to see it.
Maybe they'll play inspired with you in the house.
That's not for like a championship ring ceremony, is it? It's not a Super Bowl ring ceremony.
Wow, you going to go there with
Oh, no, wait, it's
Donovan,
the Eagles.
Go there with
It's the
you've
Eagles.
done a lot more than the
Eagles
rest
made
of
the
us.
playoffs later than the Giants have.
We appreciate you. We'll see you next week. Have fun at the game tonight.
Thank you so much.
Let's talk some Saturday football, though. Did you guys see that game? Ohio State wins the game, but wasn't able to win their division, which means they will not play in the conference championship game. Are they deserving of a spot in the playoff? We get into all of it next.
Live good, life will be better. Do it now and don't wait for later. Lend a hand to your brother.
Michigan and Ohio State on a collision course.
Best rivalry in all of football.
The loser ain't going to the playoff.
Michigan capitalizes on the failed fake punt. Handoff over the top. Mike Weber, touchdown, Buckeyes. It is up, and it is good. Overtime between the Wolverines and the Buckeyes. Touchdown, Darwin. What a catch. Keeper, head, right at the marker.
I'm bitterly disappointed with officiating today. My view of the first down was that short.
Ohio State can win it. 6 here. Samuel turns it outside. Touchdown, Buckeyes. Ohio State wins. They knock off their arch rival, and they're still alive to win a national championship. That's what we'll talk about for years to come.
What a game. It was a crazy weekend in the Big Ten as Ohio State managed to outlast Michigan in double overtime on Saturday. Now, many people think they still deserve to be in the playoff picture despite finishing second in the Big Ten East and their one loss to Penn State, who won the division. So, Max, should Ohio State still get a playoff spot?
Obviously, they should still get a playoff spot. I can't believe you or anyone really wants to debate the other side of this, Stephen A., but you'll have a shot. Look, they finished second in the country. Second in FPI, say they're the second best team in the country. And because they have one loss to Penn State, who's in their division, who's in their conference, and they won't play in that conference championship, people want to disqualify them based on that. Why? Because of a sense of tradition to the conferences and reverence for the conferences. They have been devalued by the playoff system. You want your cake and you want to eat it too. 2. Here's your cake. You ate it, you can't still have it. Here's your playoff system. It devalues somewhat the regular season. There's not quite as much emphasis on wins and losses throughout the regular season as there used to be. And it devalues the importance of the conference championship. It does. Now, if Penn State was one of the best 4 teams, that's another story, or arguably. But if they're the 15th best team, it ain't going to be Penn State anyway. So how does a loss to them in the conference, the only loss of the season, change anything? Look, Ohio State's beaten 4 top 15 teams at the time they played them, 3 top 10 teams at the time they played them. I don't hear anyone making the argument that they're not a top 4 team, and that's what the playoff is about. The top 4 teams go. Where you finish in your conference is entirely irrelevant. And that's the way it is.
Well, first of all, that doesn't mean it should be. And secondly, I'll give you the rare courtesy of saying you're actually more definitive on this subject than I am. It's a rare moment. You're entitled to it. Congratulations with that. But I will tell you
might be on the wrong side of this argument.
A couple of things to consider here. When we talk about Ohio State, first of all, I believe style points matter. I believe style points matter. How you look in the throes of your performances matter to me. It matters to me that Ohio State lost to Penn State, even more so after this weekend than when they had originally lost to Penn State. The reason for that being, Max, is that they lose to Penn State, okay? Penn State is one of the top 10 teams in the nation. Yes, it does have 2 losses on its docket, but it beat Ohio State, and more importantly, when Ohio State beat Michigan State, they squeezed by them. Penn State annihilated them this past weekend, beat them 45-12. Ohio State won.
You arguing Penn State should be in the playoff?
No.
So that's irrelevant then.
No. Here's why it's relevant to me. What I'm saying is it's not as definitive a thing for me to look at Ohio State and say you absolutely positively should be in the 4. Not just because of those style points, but because of the inconsistency on the part of the bowl committee. A couple of years ago, TCU was in the top 4. Ohio State was at number 6. Next thing you know, after they sit up there and they finish out their regular season, Ohio State inexplicably leapfrogs over TCU and Baylor and all of that stuff. They're in the Final 4. They ultimately capture the national championship. Last year, they go 12-1. They lose 1 game to a Big Ten championship. But somehow, some way, Oklahoma, who loses to a 7-5 West Virginia team, ends up in the playoffs where they get beat down by Clemson. It just seems to be no rhyme or reason going on when it comes to the bowl committee. This is what my boy Champ, my boy Rob, and a bunch of people have been lamenting about the college football committee. It's an absence from consistency. So whereas I'm not definitively saying that you're wrong, I'm saying that there should be some kind of definitive criteria that we can attach ourselves to where we're able to say, okay, legitimately, this is why you do or do not belong there. And to me, the only thing I can lean on right now, believe it or not, is style points. Penn State not just only beat you, but they annihilated the same opponent you just squeezed by a week earlier.
If you're not arguing Penn State is a top 4 team, that doesn't matter. And I would say the only way you go to style points with Ohio State because of the 1 loss is that 1 loss. In other words, if they were undefeated, you wouldn't go to style points. And I want to remind everybody, they lost to Penn State on a late 4th quarter blocked field goal attempt that was taken to the house. Now, you mean to tell me they should therefore be kept out of the top 4 even though they otherwise deserve it because of a breakdown, a fluky thing on special teams?
No. I'm not limiting it.
Because that team is in their conference?
You're right if I'm just limiting it to that. I am not. I am saying to you it's the combination of that. It's the combination of how they looked against Michigan State compared to how Penn State looked against Michigan State, not to mention how they won this game on Saturday. I thought it was a poorly played game for the first 3 quarters. The 4th quarter was epic and what happened.
Michigan.
I understand that.
Some suspect officiating.
It's some suspect officiating.
Just beat Michigan.
I understand that. But what I'm saying to you is all of those things, when you're leaving the Washingtons of the world out of the mix and others like that, that's what, see, to me, I'm a Washington guy in terms of, they've looked better for the vast majority of this season than Ohio State. Ohio State to me is a top 4 team. Ohio State to me is a top 4 team. But I do not like the way that they've looked, and I don't like the way people like yourself and others appear to be ignoring how they have looked.
I want to say, I think Ohio State's got to be there, but I'll say one thing about Washington. There is an argument to be made, and I think I've made it on this show. In fact, I have made it, that the various conferences should be represented. And the Pac-12, the East Coast bias based on when games start and everything else, if there's a good team out in the Pac-12, I generally think that they deserve the benefit of the doubt. So you get better representation. But I don't think that affects Ohio State.
Do you think you should have to win your division?
That's where I was going.
It's going to open Pandora's box.
Molly, that's where I was going. You are not even a conference champion.
So what?
You are, well, listen. It's
So only lost.
It's
Too
supposed
ambiguous.
to matter, though. It's supposed
the
to matter.
conferences don't matter as much anymore. Everyone's got to deal with it.
The SEC champion is going to be up in there. The ACC champion is going to be up in there. The Big 12 champion is probably going to be up in there. But somehow, some way, you know what I'm saying, the Big 10.
No, it won't be. That's right. It won't be.
There's something that's wrong. I'm just saying. Again, there has to be some level, some criteria that we can lean on. My only issue is that I don't see a definitive criteria
because
on the
that's
part
right.
of the
College
committee,
football, which,
and that on the
which
part
a
of the
lot
committee,
of people,
and I don't like that.
A lot of people didn't like that even before the playoff in college football, and I never minded it. The lack of symmetry, the lack of it's not homogenous like every other sport. It's quirky college football. It's kind of more like boxing that way, and I like that. Why does every sport have to be perfectly homogenous?
The committee has an opportunity to set a precedent right now.
I'm talking about the Pac-12, but you got SEC, ACC, Pac-12, Big 10 champion. It would be nice with two at-large.
It'd be nice, but it didn't happen that way this year.
I'm just saying, you know, it's like it's something that's just fishy about it, especially when Penn State annihilates a team you just squeezed by, and they beat you.
Either you put Penn State in or you can't argue against Ohio.
I got you.
And
I got you.
On a much more serious note, gentlemen, regarding Penn State, we're following a developing story. There is an active shooter on campus. The university Ohio State has been tweeting out what's going on. We've also been told Columbus fire officials have confirmed to CNN that at least 7 people have been taken to Columbus hospitals with injuries. So our hearts and prayers go out to them, that all these students and faculty
Ohio State.
Yes, Ohio State.
You see why it's important when we bring up on Friday's show how you can't be on the football field arguing with each other and then talking about emptying clips. You see what I'm saying?
Of course. When we come back, we go back to the NFL. The Patriots escaped New York with the win, but didn't look good doing it. Is this the beginning of the Brady cliff dive? Ryan Clark will join us next.
Tom Brady's just about done. It could be his next game he plays. It could be a year from now, but he is going to fall off a cliff. Tom Brady is going to be a bum in short order. That will happen. Brady will go from being elite, maybe he's still the best, to can no longer play effectively in the NFL. It's going to happen in an eye blink either this year or next.
So dramatic. That was Max Kellerman predicting the end is near for Tom Brady's greatness before the season. And yesterday, it looked like he could be onto something. As Brady and the Pats struggled for most of the game against the Jets, they did manage to get the win, which was his 200th in Brady's career, tying him with Peyton Manning for the most all time. Brady overthrew or underthrew 26% of his pass attempts yesterday, his highest off-target percentage this season. Ryan Clark in the house. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Is this...
Ryan?
Max, is this the beginning of the end for Tom Brady, as you've predicted?
Yeah, I mean, unless you want to say the second half of last year was. Look, whenever you say on TV something good about a player, people feel like you're pro that player. Bad about a player, you're anti that player. I'm not pro or anti Tom Brady. I both consider him the greatest quarterback of all time already. I think he has that. And I think he's about to fall off a cliff. Now, no quarterback who's ever lived has been elite at the age of 41. Which will be Tom Brady at the end of next season. So I said at the time, 18 months left and he's going to fall off a cliff. And by the way, fall off a cliff that language is specific. I'm not saying he's going to decline like this. I'm saying he's cruising at an elite altitude and then straight down. Because that's what happened, as it did to Peyton Manning, as it has to all old quarterbacks like that. They can do this forever. Brett Favre, he can keep going till he's 45 off the cliff. Now, last year we saw Tom Brady as two different quarterbacks. Oh, because of injuries, because of this, because of that. Yeah, there are always reasons. But here's the bottom line. First half, he was one of the greatest quarterbacks anyone had ever seen. No one else will be in the MVP conversation. Second half, he had a QBR sub 60. It plummeted. Older quarterback wearing down. This year, first 4 games, which occurred in the first half of the season after the suspension, maybe the greatest stretch of quarterbacking of all time. Ha ha, Max, look, he's better than ever. You know what he's done in the last 3 games? He is sandwiched in total QBR between Aaron Rodgers and Brock Osweiler. He's the 14th. It's about league average. Between Aaron Rodgers and Brock Osweiler, 2 guys who are being roundly criticized for their quarterback play. And while his QBR is still very good, it's above 70, it's fallen off from 94 to that level in those 3 games. Here comes the second half of the season, a 24 or 22-point nosedive in his QBR. So far, Now, will he play next year? I think so, and I think he'll be even maybe very good until the second half of next season. But that's the outer limit. Tom Brady, we are seeing the beginning. Doesn't mean he'll never have another good game, but we are seeing the beginning of the end of the greatest quarterback who ever lived. Here comes the cliff.
You go ahead, bro. Like you ready.
He irritates me with this subject. He really, really does, because it's so disrespectful. I mean, listen, I'm a native New Yorker, as is he. And, you know, I'm prone to be allergic to anything that elevates Boston and the Massachusetts area in any kind of way, because New Yorkers, you know, we hate all their sports teams and their sports heroes, even though I love Big Papi and stuff like that. But Tom Brady, he's having, you know, he's falling off a cliff, you know. Just look at the numbers. He's completed 68% of his passes. I just want to throw that out there. He's got 18 touchdowns and 1 interception. 1. That's it. One interception, 8 touchdowns, a QBR of 89. Now, I don't want to throw out those numbers, but I thought it was necessary.
He threw out a lot of numbers, too.
Since he threw that out, I thought it was necessary to offset it just to make sure we understand what we're seeing.
QBR has dropped 20-something points in the second half.
Excuse me. He's probably took the day off against San Francisco. The Jets are the Jets. When they go up against Tom Brady, he usually wins, but sometimes it's a struggle. The game before that, I'm sorry, he played against the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, he threw for 316 yards, completed 71% of his passes. But why throw that number out? Why? It really doesn't matter, because it was only against the #1 defense in the NFL. I mean, why bother? You know, Tom Brady falling off a cliff. Do you have any idea who the quarterbacks are in the NFL? Tom Brady off a cliff is still better than 75% of the damn quarterbacks in the NFL, because half of them stink, and the other third of them, you know, are average at best. So your definition of falling off a cliff, where, you know, it just falls off of it,
Roadrunner style.
When I see it, I'll be the first to let you know.
You didn't see it with Peyton Manning and Brett Favre? Because people had the same reaction when I said that.
Well, excuse me.
That's the history of the NFL.
No, I don't view it that way.
Okay.
And Tom Brady, Peyton Manning had those injuries that Tom Brady's never had. Go ahead.
So here's the thing. Max, you hedge your bets really well.
Yes, he does.
Right? Because you're like, he won't be elite or greatest quarterback of all time, but he's going to fall off a cliff. But falling off a cliff don't mean he's not going to have some good games, but he's going to fall off the cliff. You know what? I like the way you do it, though, because you say the cliff thing really loud. And then the other stuff, you throw it in there, right? So when they try to replay this, they will put the stuff you said loud, but then you say, but no, you heard that? I said he would have a great game.
It's actually a good plan. Let me write it down.
I said he would do something. So here's the thing. You know who Steve Rogers is?
Yeah.
Right, Steve Rogers, you might know, Steve Rogers was Captain America before they put him in the machine.
Yeah,
right?
Before he gets super soldier suit.
Right, before he did all that, right? And so that's Tom Brady we saw at the Combine, right? The dude that had more body fat than muscle mass in his picture, the dude that ran a 4 ever, and then he went to, I'm saying he's still human, because Captain America's still human. Even though they souped him up,
he maxed out human potential.
Right, so eventually Captain America could die. As will Tom Brady, as will we all, because we're all just breathing until death.
Right.
But watching what he did the last 3 games, what you see are the numbers, right? Because you got to go look the numbers up so you can know what's going on. Oh, let's see what the numbers say. What I saw was when they needed 83 yards to win the game, he got it done. What I see is a guy like Stephen A. Smith says, 18-1. And so these guys we're talking about in the MVP race, Derek Carr, he's 22-5. Dak Prescott, he's 18-2. Now you have your Drew Brees. You have your Drew Brees, who is just off the charts. But Tom Brady's right in there in that mix after missing 4 games. After missing 4 games. So you go on the road to San Francisco, it's a slow start, and you bring it back. Here's the other issue.
Can you go back to the human part? In other words, all you're saying is eventually we all die because we're human, and quarterbacks will die the sport's death too.
Real heavy.
And all I'm saying is it's not even me, others have identified the date at which quarterbacks expire, and without exception, it is before the age of 41, and all I've done at that point is addition, or in this case,
which is why I call you spot element.
Right.
That's exactly why I call you
We're just identifying the date.
He has 3 more years.
History logic says
Tom Brady has 3 more years.
No, he doesn't.
He has 3 more years.
Easy.
Right?
That's what they said about Peyton and Favre.
Maybe
Peyton
not 3
did
more
win a
years.
Super Bowl. Let's
Maybe
not
not
forget
3
his
more
last
years.
year.
He won a Super Bowl.
Maybe not 3 more years is the greatest quarterback of all time, but he has 3 more years of being elite and playing, by the way, with people nobody else wants. Right?
Incorrect. The Patriots are so bad at making a team.
Listen to me. Just listen to me for once. Just calm down. Right? Other than Gronk, there's no elite receiver on this team. Malcolm Mitchell, I'll see him any day. Julian Edelman, I'll see him any day. Amendola, I'll see you any day. But Tom Brady puts these people together, and they look really, really good. And then they leave, and we never hear about them. Yesterday, there was no Gronk. Martellus Bennett is injured. What does he do? He finds James White. He finds Malcolm Mitchell. He finds ways to score. And that's what greats do. He is still great. Now, we could break down the numbers and talk about the age all we want. He got 3 more years. And if he plays 3 more years, guess what he's done?
What's that?
At that age, at the end of his career, he's had the average career of an NFL player.
But here's the deal.
Huh?
And
3 years is the average career of an NFL player. So you're saying he's falling off the cliff, and I'm saying he'll get that.
Here's the deal. He's not going to last 3 more years. And your only source of evidence is the fact that
the history of mankind.
Brett Favre and Peyton Manning.
My source of evidence is the history of mankind.
Captain America, history of mankind.
No matter how many
We're all going to die.
I got news for you. You've said it 1,000 times. We heard you. History of mankind. We heard you loud and clear. Your evidence is not there. It's not there. Because at the fact of the matter, when you look at Peyton Manning, you look at injuries. When you look at Brett Favre, we know how he got beat up. The bounty gate existed for a reason now. We saw what happened to Brett Favre.
When you look at every other quarterback who ever lived?
Wait. He's clearly the exception because not too many 6-rounders have looked like Tom Brady. He's the greatest ever, according to you.
Yes.
Also, you're the same guy on the record, just so because I don't know if you were here when he said.
Let me know, Steve. I like the
He also said the same thing about Drew Brees. And what I said to him was this.
Yes.
Drew Brees, face of the organization, deserves his money. Give that man what he wants because this is who he is. He said Drew Brees going to fall off a cliff too.
Yes, not yet, but before 41.
Time out.
Well, I can say people going to die before 100.
That's right.
Well, yes, if you look, if the outer limit, if the outer limit,
they had to do it in Virginia. That's 106. Can't get a date.
Anyone has ever lived,
they got to do it in Virginia. That's 106. Talking about he can't get a date on TV.
The latest anyone has ever lived, the longest, let's say, is 122 years, and there's some old person who appears to be in perfect health, and you say they're going to live 123 years. I'm going to say if they do, they've defeated the odds. You're making the argument that Tom Brady will defeat
I'm making the Tom Brady argument.
Odds.
I'm making a Tom Brady argument, not a world mankind quarterback.
I would suggest betting on mankind.
I hope we all live long, happy, healthy lives
You brought up Steve Rogers. You remember Vicky? From iRobot with Will Smith. My logic cannot be denied.
I like iRobot, but it's not as iconic as Captain America.
Well, iRobot was a good movie. Will Smith did a good job.
He'll be back with us a little later in the show. Appreciate you.
Vicky. That's
Steve Rogers, 95-pound weakling to Captain America.
Yes, sir.
My logic can't be denied.
Colin Kaepernick is making news, and it has nothing to do with what he's doing on the field. We'll explain and react after the break.
Takes the snap, steps up, feels pressure, has Beckham on the cross. He's to the 25-20, high steps to the 15, to the 10, to the 5, touchdown Giants! 32 yards for Odell Beckham Jr.
Odell Beckham Jr. has been nothing short of sensational this season, catching 2 more touchdowns yesterday against the Browns, putting his season total at 8. It was his 3rd game this season with multiple receiving TDs. Max Kellerman, is Odell Beckham the best wide receiver in the National Football League?
Yes, he is. And that has been the case. He has been the best wide receiver in the NFL since he first stepped on the field. It was just harder to prove back then. Every single day of his career since his first game, while he's on the field, not talking about his overall impact in the locker room, media distraction, everything else, he's actually been the best. And what tells you are your eyeballs. Antonio Brown is amazing. The strongest argument based on the numbers can probably be made for him. Julio Jones is amazing. These guys are amazing. And there were amazing receivers in Jerry Rice's era, but they were playing in the Jerry Rice era. Odell Beckham is so talented that he's compared, like early on in his career, people were comparing him to Michael Jordan because his talent transcends the position and the sport. And yeah, through his first 25 games, he was trouncing everyone who ever lived in every category who'd ever played the position, including Randy Moss and Jerry Rice and all those guys. But now through 38 games, first all-time in receptions. In receiving yards. 5th all-time in touchdowns. 2nd in receptions. All-time through 38 games. And he has drawn more attention defensively, maybe than any player in the NFL who plays a skills position. I mean, all the resources on the other side of the ball are devoted to stopping Odell Beckham. And maybe that's loosening up a little bit now that Shepard has shown that he's a real guy. And maybe that's why, Odell's doing a little better now. But in terms of the numbers. But if we're just on it, it's like I said this weekend after the Lomachenko fight, Stephen A. Smith. He doesn't have the resume yet, Lomachenko, to prove that he's the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. I'm not going to win that argument based on resume. But you ask me my opinion, who I think is the best, I think it's him. Odell Beckham Jr., I believe, is the best, and I've thought that since I saw him play his first game. I still think it.
I think you're caught up in the sauce. I think that Odell Beckham Jr. is electrifying, no doubt. Nothing away from him. But he's about 3 pounds. He's about 3 inches shorter, about nearly 30 pounds lighter. And I think that you're limited in where you can put him on a football field. Now, his speed, his athleticism, his ability to catch the football and all of that stuff is obviously rarefied air. I think he's one of the top 3 receivers in all of football. And if you want to make an argument to me that he's just as, if not more electrifying than Antonio Brown, okay, fine. Even though Antonio Brown is big time in my eyes as well, they do the same things on the football field, not just as wide receivers, but also in special teams, which I saw Odell Beckham Jr. performing in yesterday. But when I think about a wide receiver, I think about, money on the line, not to say that Odell Beckham Jr. is not there as well. But again, I'm thinking about the bigger target. I'm thinking about physicality. I'm thinking about the kind of things he could do. You could put him on one side or left or right side. You can put him in the slot. You can do a whole bunch of things with Julio Jones. Odell Beckham Jr. is so electrifying that the places that he's limited in which he can play, he can make things happen because of his speed and his athleticism and his catching ability. But I think that outside of that electrifying speed, I think everything else that he has, Julio Jones has, combined with size and being a bigger target, and that's why I give Julio Jones the edge.
You guys have like this amazing ability to be really, really right and really, really wrong all at the same time. I think it makes you both geniuses, by the way. I came on here to say Odell Beckham Jr. was the best in the league, and then you talked me out of it with your argument for him, because you mentioned guys like Jerry Rice and Randy Moss and Michael Jordan. I got confused and mixed up all in there because he's none of those people. He isn't. But what Odell Beckham Jr. is what I've been standing on the table saying Antonio Brown has been for years. Because everybody will make that argument about Julio Jones. It's the size, right? And that's something you can't teach. That's something you can't coach. And Julio Jones has those things, plus all the other things that these guys have in a bigger package. But I used to say this about Antonio Brown, and now Odell Beckham Jr. has moved into that spot for me. I used to say if you take all of that away, sort of like your pound for pound argument, right? Because if Lomachenko fights somebody other than Walters who's big, he's going to lose because of the size. When we were all going through the assembly line in heaven, right, and we had our shopping carts, right, there's some receivers who only had one. Odell has like 3, right, and it's full of speed and agility and hands. And so when you talk about overall receivers, when we take height out of it, Odell Beckham has the largest toolbox of any receiver. He can run every route. I don't agree with Stephen A. that you can't put him certain places because he can play slot. We've seen him run the ball from the backfield. He can be the #1 receiver outside. And the ability, if you saw it yesterday, the ability to catch a crosser with Joe Hayden, thought to be one of the league's better cornerbacks, chasing him and totally outrun his angle and the angle of 3 other people to score the touchdown.
Little slant, take it to the house.
That is rare. And he can do that. I think that's something that Antonio Brown used to be able to do. I feel like he's lost a step of that explosiveness, which makes Odell Beckham Jr. take that spot of pound for pound.
I want to say one thing.
I did not say he can't do it. I said that I would prefer Julio Jones over him.
I got you.
And
I think that's the argument for Julio Jones. It's Odell, but blown up into a bigger package. I don't think it's quite Odell. I think Odell is actually more talented. But I want to say one thing about Odell. The worst thing that could happen for him in terms of his reputation around the league was the catch. Because what that catch did was gave everyone an escape valve. Because no one wants to admit when a guy turns pro, that dude is already the best. Like when Roy Jones Jr. turned pro, after his first pro fight, I was like, over a short fight, I don't know anyone who could beat Roy right now in the middleweight division, right? That's Odell.
I just want to say for the record that I was always a dude, as much as I loved Roy Jones Jr., who said, I need to see you get hit and how you respond.
Yeah, sure.
I just want to make sure. I just want to make sure
the point is, that catch allowed people the out of saying, well, he's getting all these props because of that catch. No, that catch caused him to be underrated because everyone started to say that and look away from his overall ability. What that catch was an expression of his talent. It indicated it was something no one else can do but Odell Beckham Jr., and it's not just that, it's everything.
Here's where I think you're wrong. When you talk about that catch, you act like from the day he walked into the NFL, he's what he is now. No, Odell Beckham Jr. is better now than he was last year.
I agree with that.
He's better now than he was the year before. Here's
your other issue. Even though Odell has done what he's done and he's done those numbers are compared to people just starting their career, rookies. While he's doing that, Julio, Antonio, we getting 1,800. We getting 136 catches. So if you put the numbers side by side, right, if we do it Ivy League style like you like to do it, those numbers don't match up. They don't match up in today's, in the way the game is now.
Do the Falcons and do the Steelers have good offensive lines or bad offensive lines?
The Falcons have an okay offensive line.
Nothing great.
Compared to the Giants.
We're not talking about the Dallas Cowboys.
But right, because they don't have a receiver quite like that.
They both get just as much attention as
I don't
Odell
think
Beckham.
they do, number one. Number two, the Giants receivers for a lot of this year couldn't even get into their routes because the offensive line was so bad. That doesn't affect his numbers.
Here's the thing. You don't think they do get the attention. I know they do get the attention.
I will defer to you on that subject.
Brian, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Tomorrow. Coming up next, Colin Kaepernick is making news, and it has nothing to do with what he's doing on the field. We'll explain, we'll react in just a moment. Colin Kaepernick was booed Sunday when he took the field in Miami, and it wasn't just because he was in front of the Dolphins' home crowd. Miami is home to a large community of Cuban exiles that are outraged over Kaepernick's comments supporting the man they consider a brutal oppressor, the now deceased Cuban leader Fidel Castro, who died Friday. During a conference call with Miami reporters on Wednesday, Kaepernick defended his choice to wear a T-shirt depicting a meeting between Malcolm X and Castro, praising the dictator for investing in Cuba's education system as opposed to the American investment in the prison system. He spoke to reporters after the 49ers loss and expounded on those remarks, which he said were taken out of context. Quote, I agree with the investment in education. I also agree with the investment in free universal health care, as well as the involvement in helping end apartheid in South Africa. I would hope that everybody agrees those things are good things in trying to push that false narrative that I was a supporter of the oppressive things that he did is just not true. Max, your reaction?
I supported Kaepernick largely in his protest. It is not okay to lionize Fidel Castro in any way. And it's not, Molly, that Cuban exiles consider him a brutal dictator. It's that he was one. That's what he was. And this revisionist history using the relativism of world governments and how governments don't always behave properly, and even bad governments do some good things. It's absurd to focus or even mention that in his case. It's absurd. You cannot support Castro. Certainly not public. This is not Castro during the Cuban Revolution, who was seen by many, for good reason, as a champion of the people. We have more information since then. He became a communist dictator. And for people like Colin Kaepernick, little knowledge is dangerous. Either he's read a couple books on the subject and that's everything he knows about it, or he knows a lot about the subject and doesn't have the ability to properly process the information. I'm not saying America love it or leave it. I don't go with that crowd. I say America love it or change it. But the fact is, and we all know the history toward people of color in this country, the terrible history and the ongoing struggle. And yet, what we don't see are people risking their lives on rafts to get to Cuba. But we do see that going the other way. And I would quote Dan Le Batard's response on Twitter yesterday to Jill Stein, the presidential candidate, who sent out a tweet lionizing Castro. Get all the way the hell out of here, lady. And I would say to Kaepernick, with the Castro support in any way, get all the way the hell out of here. If Kaepernick's point is that capitalism has its problems, I would tell him the old expression. Capitalism is the worst system, except for every other system in the history of the world. Get all the way the hell out of here with support for a brutal communist dictator.
Before I engage in condemnation about the flaming hypocrite that Colin Kaepernick is, let me cut him a break in this regard. From a black perspective, it matters to a lot of black people. He's not lying about that to a lot of black people. It matters that Fidel Castro met in Harlem with Malcolm X in 1960. It matters that Fidel Castro sent 25,000 troops to Angola to fight, to oppose the old apartheid government of South Africa. It matters to black people that when Nelson Mandela was released after 27 years of incarceration, unfairly, as we all know, that one of the first things that he did in 1991 was travel to Cuba to thank Fidel Castro and the Cuban people for their support. So if you are black and you see support from Malcolm X and you see support from Nelson Mandela, it resonates. It gives you cause to pause. Having said all of that, here's where we go awry. And I would defer to the great column in last Friday's paper in the Miami Herald by Armando Salguero, who writes for the Miami Herald, who is of Cuban descent, along with our friend Dan Lebertard, who I love dearly. Let's be clear. I am not Cuban. They are. And if anybody can speak to their suffering, no matter how eloquent you sound, no matter how eloquent I might try to sound, or you for that matter, Molly, nobody can speak to the suffering of the Cuban people better than them, their ancestry, the people that are connected to them. And I say, when you hear them talk about this dictatorship, this regime, you're talking about dungeons, you're talking about firing squads, you're talking about murder, you're talking about, what is this here? The Human Rights Watch. According to the Human Rights Watch, Cuban citizens have been systematically deprived of their fundamental rights to free expression, privacy, association, assembly, movement, and due process of law. You know, when you hear those kind of things, and you're Colin Kaepernick, and you're talking about the stuff that he's talking about, when your sorry, pathetic behind didn't even have the decency to register to vote, to activate yourself in this election. You know, it's a damn crime that you would even sit up there. I told you to shave that damn afro. Stop acting like you're a militant. You're ignorant. And that's the bottom line. I'm not questioning his intelligence. I'm saying ignorance on the part is he picks and chooses what he wants to disseminate. I'm not saying he doesn't know any better. I'm accusing him of knowing better and not caring. He only cares about what he cares about as opposed to what's real. And when you've got the Cuban folks throughout the United States of America and beyond speaking about how vile this man was and his regime was since 1959, even though he took over, the coup where he got the previous regime out of there and they were torturous, to ignore all of that because of things that you want to isolate and compartmentalize. It's a crime against those people because it reeks of insensitivity. It's incredibly alarming that Colin Kaepernick to choose to do such a thing. And I was happy that Armando Salguero got on him about it.
I want to respond to one thing you said. Of course, no one can know what the Cuban people go through except for the Cuban people who went through it and their families. But my point of view is people of goodwill all around the world, if Cuban people are being brutally repressed, then we are all Cuban. If little girls are being kidnapped in Nigeria, then I'm Nigerian.
Totally.
If this country wants to make Muslims register, then I'm Muslim.
Well, what I'm saying is
I think people with social conscience have to adopt that position.
You're right. They have to, and then I'll come to you, Molly. You're right. They have to adopt a position. All I was trying to say is that when those very people are in your presence and they can speak to their suffering, there's an elevated and heightened level of sensitivity that from a human perspective, I believe you're obligated to recognize. And the fact that his refusal to recognize that and, to spout and disseminate You know, his message, to me, reeks of insensitivity, and it's a damn shame. Go ahead, Molly. I'm sorry.
I also think one thing that he pointed out was Fidel Castro invested in their education system, and they have high literacy rates, which they do. But he also controlled what they were able to read, and they didn't have internet access. And he talked about our prison system, which, yes, it's flawed and it's broken, and how it separates families. Fidel Castro also separated families. I don't know what it's like to be Cuban American, but I know what it's like to have family under communism and to get up early in the morning and send medical supplies and try to send food and try to send money and have it intervened and them calling and crying on the phone. What this man did, Fidel Castro, is he oppressed his people for nearly 6 decades. That legacy is firing squads, it's poverty, it's denying human rights. And last I checked, Cuban Americans are people of color. So I understand when you're talking about African Americans and how there's some sympathy in what he did with apartheid, in which I understand.
Some folks feel that way, not all of us.
But these are also people of color. So when he's going to go out and speak on these subjects, he can't have the surface level knowledge. It's so ill-informed, it's so insensitive, and it's so disrespectful.
Literacy rates are self-reported by the Cuban government.
That's right.
You believe what the Cuban government says?
Exactly. By the way, last point, and I think this is a very, very important point to make, not to get too political, but our president, Barack Obama, reopened diplomatic relations with Cuba, right? Well, what happened in this election? Because we know that Hillary Clinton was an extension of the Obama administration, the Obama era. Well, what happens? They won Florida. The Republicans won Florida, in large part because the Cubans came out and supported something different. In other words, what I'm trying to say is these folks did not want these diplomatic relations
that's a larger conversation.
This is a larger conversation.
For another forum, probably.
Yes.
I want to leave us with one visual because I was watching this coverage closely on Saturday morning, and some former Cuban exiles were talking about how they would pour Kool-Aid packets into envelopes to send over just so their family could get calories. So just to put this in perspective of how dire it was in this country. Coming up next, we're going to make a left turn here and go back to the NFL. The Falcons were flying high against the NFL's #1 defense on Sunday, but are they Super Bowl contenders? Merrill Hodge will join us. Let's talk some football, shall we? The Falcons' offense has been stellar this season, and yesterday they just kept rolling in their 38-19 win over the Cardinals. This was their 7th game this season with at least 30 points as Matty Ice found Taylor Gabriel for 2 TDs. The Falcons are now 7-4, their best start through 11 games since 2012 when they went to the NFC Championship game. Merrill Hodge in the house. Good day.
Okay, how are you?
What's going on, man?
Always good to see you. Let's get into this. Are the Falcons Super Bowl contenders?
Wow, if there's any doubt. You know, actually, what last week showed is there are so many teams that are potential Super Bowl teams. You know, and that really should give a lot of football fans, you know, hope and excitement. There is no one dominant team. I don't care what you picked. I don't care if we picked the Cowboys, the Patriots, Seattle, even though they lost. There's no dominant team. There's no team that says, that's everybody's got to beat that. Nothing like that. In fact, Tampa in that Seattle game was a great example of those teams like Tampa that are just right on the edge. You know, they start playing a little better or stay at the level they played at yesterday, they could clearly be in the NFC Championship game, as well as Seattle. So, to me, Atlanta Falcons, there's no doubt. The one hiccup I keep seeing, just when I'm about to say they are as complete as we have in the NFL, is they get hammered like they did 2 weeks ago against Philadelphia. And that always brings doubt because there's going to be a team that's going to bring that to the party in the playoffs. So that's the only hiccup. However, there's nobody without flaws. So I don't think there's any question offensively with all the phases they have the most phases in all of football. That rolls and that keeps rolling during the playoffs. Sure, they're playoff worthy and Super Bowl worthy.
I think obviously you're right, but I think that's the NFL generally year in and year out. Not that there aren't sometimes teams where you go, no one's messing with them. But we all know, and I've seen it from my New York Football Giants twice in recent years, where if you're good enough to get in and you get hot at the right time and you get a little lucky, because the Giants also got lucky on their runs, you can win a Super Bowl. I'm going to take that off the table because then you can include 10, 12, 15 teams who, if they got hot, they could do it. I don't think they are. And I base it just on the kind of a gut reaction. If the team I root for is playing the Falcons, I think they got a good shot to win. If they're playing a healthy Patriots or the Cowboys or Seattle, I'm more nervous. So if I had to, I do this a lot, plot them on a bell curve, who are the actual teams on the far right end, the actual good teams, I don't put the Falcons quite there because of the defense. And so I say by that standard, they're not Super Bowl contenders.
Well, based on your conventional thinking, you're not wrong. But based on the facts of this season, I think you're wrong. And here's why. When I think about the Atlanta Falcons, they're the worst pass defense in the NFL. They rank dead last. We understand that. Not so badly against the run. They're actually top 10 against the run, 10th to be exact. But they were horrible against the pass. The flip side is that their running game is not that bad with Devontae Freeman. This kid, Taylor Gabriel, is something special. He's a speedster, and I love the way what I saw from him yesterday. Their passing attack is big time with a Julio Jones. Mohamed Sanu coming over from Cincinnati. That's been a welcomed acquisition to this team. And so when I look at it from that perspective, and I see how high-powered they are offensively, as putrid as they may be against the pass defensively, well, what's the problem with the Cowboys? Can you get at the pass? And as a result, doesn't it expose your secondary? Well, what's the problem with Seattle? Well, your defense is elite, but offensively, you're struggling right now because you can't protect your quarterback, and your running game is suspect. And so when we look at the rest of the NFC, if there was a team that was big time on offense and decent on defense, or big time on defense and decent on offense, then all right, that's a given. But it just seems like everywhere you look within the NFC, everybody's this one way in one category and down here in the other category, whether it's offense or defensively. It's like a damn roller coaster ride. And so to me, that's what makes it interesting with Atlanta, because offensively, they're as explosive as anybody in the NFC. And defensively, they're not. And the only team to offset that is Seattle, whose defense is elite, but whose offense is suspect. So then you got the Dallas Cowboys with their running game. That's how I look at it. Am I wrong?
No, and actually both of you hit great points, which if you put down and listen to you, and you filter down, then who has the least amount of flaws is what we're coming down to. Who has the least amount of flaws?
Right.
The Dallas Cowboys. I know you don't want to hear it.
Yep.
I know you don't want to hear it, my brother. But that's who has the least amount of flaws.
It's a terrible world.
How
did I wake up into this nightmare world where the Cowboys are the best team?
I love waking up every Monday knowing I think the Cowboys are still the best team because I'm going to see Stephen A on Monday.
They're going to find a way. They're going to mess this up. Cowboys going to mess this up.
All they got to do is lose to Minnesota at Minnesota, and then the Giants, if they beat the Steelers, they could take the division the following week.
He's it because you get specific. I don't know when it's going to happen,
when
but they will fall.
This is not good.
I know this scares me. This kid, he did it on purpose.
We thought you were going to say the defense was suspect.
Don't you know?
We didn't go there.
Listen, he likes to mess with me. Tim Kirkjian likes to mess with me. All of these guys love messing with me. He did this just to mess with me.
All right.
They're going to fall.
We get you going like this.
Let's get into another NFC team if they're legit. So a week after knocking off the Chiefs in Kansas City, the Bucs took care of business yesterday as their defense held Russell Wilson and the Seahawks to just 5 points. The Bucs improved to 6-5 on the season, which matches last season's win total, putting them above 500 after 11 games for the first time since 2012. They're currently just one game behind the Falcons in the NFC South. Stephen A., are you buying the Bucs as a playoff team?
Not yet. Not yet, but I will admit that their defense is looking big time, and Jameis Winston is making me happy right now. Mike Evans can ball too. Let's give credit where credit is due. But if there's ever a team that gives you the impression that they're a year away from elevation, it's Tampa Bay. I'm not so sold on them yet. Where's your running game come from? Where's the consistency offensively? Where's that coming from? I'm still remembering how Denver smacked you around. Plus, you lost a couple of games this year I thought you should not have lost. So I'm wondering about you. But you got the quarterback, you got the receiver, and your defense seems to be coming together, which I'm presently surprised about, but I'm not there yet.
As a playoff team, I am push comes to shove. And the reason is, I say this a lot, only the Patriots year in and year out are good at all times of the year, all times of the season. Patriots are good. Primarily because they're never the same team week to week. They tailor it to your weaknesses. No other team really, maybe Seattle kind of, but even them, is good. So really what it comes down to is who gets hot at the right time among the solid teams. Now, they trounced Chicago, so what? But then they beat KC.
At KC, too, by the way, which is important now.
And then they beat Seattle. So the question to me, for me about the Bucs is, are they getting hot still a little too early? But if instead this is who they're becoming, that's a playoff team, people. I mean, they're beating good teams on the road at maybe just the right time of the season.
I hear you both, and I agree with you both. I'm going to lean towards the facts. Okay, you got to get better, and you got to get better in certain areas. Okay, if you look at their defense as a whole, they really got exposed early in the year in their secondary. They had a lot of big plays on them. They cleaned that up for a couple of weeks. And you need to see a trend for about 4 weeks. You know, you can't stamp a team after one game. Now, defensively, it was their best game. It's probably the best executed game plan I've seen all year, how they performed against Seattle. One. Now, they're going to have to do that next week and the weekend or keep building on that. So you've seen improvement with their secondary. Doug Martin just got back, as your answer, the inconsistency there.
Yep.
Okay, now he's starting to get better. You're starting to see that. And then there's one thing I like about Jameis Winston that I see in him that I don't really see in other players. He just plays with great will. He just wills himself into someplace. He will lumber around. He will lumber around, and you'll be like, "There's no way he's going to make that play or get it," and he gets it off. I like that. And when it comes down to like a critical moment, I favor Will. So they could be your Giants, a team like that just sneaks in there at the end, but they're playing their best.
Let me say this to you.
In the end of December.
Let me say this to you real quick before you go, because I want your opinion on this. The Buccaneers, Lions probably going to win the North. That's where I'm at right now. That's just how I feel about them. You're going to have to compete with Minnesota. You're going to have to compete with two teams in the NFC East, possibly three if the Eagles win tonight. They'll have the same record as Tampa, okay? Then you also got New Orleans, not once, but twice. Drew Brees completing 71% of his passes. Drew Brees got that offense high-powered. I don't trust New Orleans' defense, but offensively, they're the real deal, and we know Tampa struggles to score sometimes. To that, you say what?
Teams win. Offense doesn't win. Defense doesn't win.
Teams.
So the team.
I'll take Tampa over the Saints right now.
I think they'll split.
Tampa or the Saints right now.
Tampa.
Both games?
Well,
No,
right now if they play.
You don't mean that. Both games? They're going to be.
No, right now if they play.
They're going to beat Drew Brees twice over the next 3 weeks?
Maybe.